So we're going to start with factoring. And I don't know how you were taught, so I'm going to try and do this both ways each time. I know it's going to be a little time consuming, but I think that'll be good for the both for all of you. So the first thing is find the greatest common factor of the polynomials below. And you can use your Desmos, but basically before, when you were multiplying and everything like that, you were filling the box in. For factoring, you're going to be working backwards. So I have 18a to the fourth, 63a cubed, and 90a. And so what's going to go here is your greatest common factor. And you can go through and look in Desmos and find your greatest common factor of 18, 63, and 90. But it is going to be 9. Okay, that's the number. So this is going to be the GCD of 18, 63, and 90, which is going to be 9. I also look for my greatest common factor, how many A's they have in common. What's the most number of A's? Well, this one has 4 A's, this one has 3 A's, this one has 1 A, so they all have just 1 A in common. Okay, so that's the first thing. I found my greatest common factor, and then I'm going to rewrite it as the quantity of 2 factors. So I'm going to rewrite it as 2 things. So what I need to do is I need to figure out what's supposed to be up here, because that will tell me what goes here when I find that greatest common factor. So I know that 9 times 2 is 18, and I have 1A here, so how many A's would have to be on the top here if we were using a box method to multiply? Well, there would have to be a total of 3 A's, because A times A cubed would be A to the fourth. That's what that is going to be. There is going to be that product. So this is going to be 2A cubed. 9 times 7 is 63. I have 1A here. There are 3 A's here, so I need a total of 2 A's. So I'm going to do 7A squared. And then 9 times 10 is 90. And I don't need any more A's because there's 1A here, and when I multiply that out, so this is going to be plus 10. For the next one, and you don't have to do the box, you can just go through and divide by the greatest common factor. Some of you guys have figured out, so my GCD of these is going to be, so 30, 27, and 9 is going to be 3. But they're all negative, so my GCD, I'm actually going to divide out each of these by a negative 3. And I also look at what else they have in common. This has 2 M's, this has 4 M's, and this is 7 M's. So the greatest common factor, the most number of M's they have in common is M squared. So I'm going to take out an M squared. So this is another way of doing it that's not the box method. So I know the greatest common factor is 3M squared. 3 goes into negative 3 goes into negative 30. That's going to be positive 10. There are no M's left. Negative 3 goes into 27. That's going to be positive 9. There are 2 M's here. There are 4 M's, which will give me 2 M's left. Negative 3 goes into negative 9. Positive 3 times. I have 2 M's. There are 7 here, so there has to be 5 left over. Okay, but I'm just going to do this using the box method as well. So this is going to be negative 30M squared minus 27M to the fourth, negative 9M to the seventh. I know that the number they have in common is negative 3. I know the most number of M's they have in common is M squared. Negative 3 times positive 10 is negative 30. I have 2 M's here. When I multiply, I still have the 2 M's. That's fine. Negative 3 times positive 9. I have 2 M's here. I have 4 M's here, so I need another 2 M's. Negative 3 times positive 3. I have 2 M's here. I need a total of 7, so I have 5 here. And you still end up with this same factors. Okay? So again, we're going to factor 2 different ways. We're going to start out with 4 terms. I'm just going to show you. So for this first one, I'm going to do the box method. Okay, so when I have 4 terms, I put them in the boxes because I know that I'm actually working backwards. I'm trying to find what 2 things I can multiply to get this right here, and it does have a purpose. This is 4x, this is 3x, and this is 6. This is always going to be your x squared. This is always going to be just your number, your last term, okay? So I'm going to do this because I have things to do. So what I need to do with this is I need to figure out what goes on the outside. So how I do that is I find the greatest common factor of this row. So I look at this row. They don't have any numbers in common. I can say that they just have one in common, but they both have an x. Okay. I look at the greatest common factor for this row. My greatest common factor for 4 and 6 is 2. They have no x's in common. Okay, so I find the greatest common factor of these rows, and then I use these to figure out what numbers go up here, just like I did with the previous problem. So I know 1 times what is 2? Well, I would know 1 times 2 is 2. This is 1x. I need another x here to give me x squared. Here, I know 1 times 3 is 3. 1x, well, I only have 1x here, so I don't need any x's next to my 3. And so my factors are going to be 1x plus 2, or just x plus 2, times 2x plus 3. If I multiply these, I'm going to end up with this same equation I have here. There's a second way to do this. You can find the greatest common factor of the first two terms and the greatest common factor of the last two terms. So the greatest common factor of 2x squared and 4x is going to be 2x. When I factor that out, I'm left with an x and a 4. My greatest common factor for my 3 and my 6 is going to be a positive 3. I divide each out. So this part, I divided each part out by 2x. This part, I divided each part by 3. I don't know why I wrote x plus 4. This should be x plus 2. This should also be x plus 2. What you notice is you have x plus 2's here. That's what they have in common. So I take that out. When I take those out, when I divide out by those, I'm left with my 2x plus 3. So that's a second way to factor. You can either use the box method or that method. So I'm just going to go through and do the remainder of these examples using the box method. So this is 3x squared, 9x, 5x, and 15. I know my greatest common factor for 3 and 9 is 3, and they also have an x in common. For my 5x and my 15, I know that they both have a 5 in common. They don't need to have any x's. 3 times 1 is 3. I can put a 1 there. I have 1x here. I know I need to have another x here to get x squared. 3 times 3 is 9. I don't need any x's here. And so my factored form is going to be 3x plus 5 times x plus 3. For those of you that prefer this method, my greatest common factor, I divide each part out by it. My greatest common factor was 3x for my first two terms. So I factor out a 3x, and I end up with an x plus 3. Here, my greatest common factor for my next two terms is 5. So I divide out by a positive 5, always put a symbol in between. And when I divide that out, I end up with x plus 3. As always, they both have x plus 3 in common. When I take those out, I write down what I'm left with, which is 3x plus 5. For the sake of the video, I will do the last two, but fast forward if you feel like you have this. So I have my 7x squared, I have my negative 2, negative 14x, positive 1x. Okay, my greatest common factor is just going to be x, my greatest common factor here. Now this is one that we haven't done. When it's a negative, you factor out a negative. Okay, so when you find the greatest common factor on this side right here, x times, well, this is 1x times 7, and x times x is x squared. Okay, I know I did that right because negative 2 times 7 is negative 14. All right, 1x times, well, just 1 is 1, and I don't need any more x's. And so my factored form is going to be x minus 2 times 7x plus 1. Doing it this way, I find my greatest common factor for each of these terms, which is 7x times x minus 2. My greatest common factor here, the only thing that they have in common is a 1. So I factor out a 1. You always have to factor out a number. I notice they both have x minus 2. What I'm left with when I divide out by that x minus 2 is 7x plus 1. And do you see that you have the exact same thing? The order doesn't matter. This one here, I have 5x squared minus 25, negative 25, and 5x. I find my greatest common factor for my row, which is 5 and x. I find my greatest common factor here, which is going to be negative 25. Five x times 1x is 5x squared. 5x times 1 is 5x. So my factored form is going to be x plus 1 times 5x minus 25. And that's one way to do it. Again, if you do the other way, my greatest common factor of 5 and 25 is 5. They also all have an x in common. So I write down what I divide out. I'm left, when I divide this out, I'm left with an x. When I divide this out, I'm left with a negative 5. Here, greatest common factor is just plain old 5. Which is going to be x minus 5. These I divide out. I have x minus 5 times 5x plus 5. Now, you're asking me, you're like, Miss Holly, you got something different for each of these. The problem is these are not factored completely, okay? So what I notice is these have a common factor. 5x and 25, they have a common factor of 5. So I can actually factor another 5 out. And so this ends up being 5 times x plus 1 times x minus 5. The same thing can be said here. These two have a common factor of 5. I can factor a 5 out. And so this ends up being x plus 1. And so do you see that you have the same thing? Okay, so last thing for today is just finding products and sums. It says find two numbers whose product is 45 and whose sum is 14. So they have to multiply to be 45 and add to be 14. So what you have to do is you have to think about the numbers that multiply to be 45, okay? So I think 5 times 9. Is 5 plus 9 equal to 14? Yes. So those are my two numbers. My two numbers are 5 and 9, okay? Next one, it says find two numbers whose product is 80 and whose sum is 18. So what I have to do is I think about the numbers that multiply to be 80. That's going to be 8 times 10. And is 8 plus 10 equal to 80? Yes. So my two numbers are going to be 8 and 10. Okay? We're going to do some that are a little tricky, and maybe you have a problem. So I'm going to show you a couple things on Desmos. So it says find two numbers whose product is 63 and whose sum is negative 16. So I'm looking for two numbers that have to multiply to be 63 and add to be negative 16. So maybe you want to try and use Desmos. We have 63 and negative 16. So I know those two numbers, x times y equal 63, and I know the two numbers that I'm looking for, x plus y equals negative 16. What I want you to see is look at your graphs that are created and find the points of intersection, because those are going to be your answers. So you only look at the x values for your So you look at your x values for your answers. So what are my numbers? My numbers are going to be negative 9 and negative 7, or negative 7 and negative 9. Those are the same thing. So you look for two numbers that multiply to be 63 and add to be negative 16, and Desmos will do it for you. Okay, and that's going to come into play. So negative 9, negative 7. Product is 55, sum is negative 16. So product is 55, sum is negative 16. And you can go through and find all the factors of 55, or you can do, you want to find two numbers, they multiply to be 55, and they add to be negative 16. And so you put x times y is 55, x plus y is 16, and you see that it gives you your answers. My numbers are going to be negative 11 and negative 5. Okay, find two numbers whose product is negative 15 and whose sum is negative 2. Okay, and you can go through all of your factors of negative 15 if you don't have Desmos. Okay, you can say, okay, well, I know 5 times 3, but one of them has to be negative. So if I did negative 5 times 3, then you can go through and do a guess and check. Or you can put it in Desmos. So this is going to be negative 5 and 3. Last one, it says find two numbers whose product is negative 12 and whose sum is 11. So I can go into Desmos, product is negative 12 and whose sum is 11. Is it negative 11? No, it's just 11. Okay, and so we zoom out and I look at it, and it's going to be negative 1, 12, or 12, negative 1, which are the same thing. Okay. So I just wanted to do these last two problems just because I think that you'll have 4 terms down, and I want to see what you can do. So when you factor with 3 terms, what you need to do is you need to split this middle term. Okay. And this middle term always multiplies to be the product of A and C and adds to be B. So right now, if I were to try to factor this, well, I'd put my x squared here and my 40 here, but I would have to figure out what goes there and there if you're doing the box method. If you're doing the FOIL method, you would have to figure out what numbers go here and here so you can find your greatest common factor. And so that's where that comes into play. Okay, in this case, I'm going to be finding two numbers that are 1 times 40, which is 40, and because that's A times C, and they have to add to be B, which is negative 13. Okay, and we can go to Desmos and find those numbers, so 40 and negative 13. So I have 40 and I have negative 13, and I look here, and my numbers are negative 5 and negative 8. And it doesn't matter how you put it. So I know that this is going to be negative 5x minus 8x plus 40, or negative 5x minus 8x. And it doesn't matter where you put these, you'll still end up with the same answer. So if I'm doing the box method, greatest common factor is x. Greatest common factor here, we pay attention, it's going to be negative 5. X times x is x squared. X times negative 8 is negative 8x. So my answer is x minus 5 times x minus 8. Over here, it's going to be, I find my greatest common factor, which is x. So that's going to be x minus 5. My greatest common factor here is going to be a negative 8. Okay, when I divide each part by a negative 8, I end up with a positive x minus 5. You notice that I have the same thing again. This is going to be x minus 5. When I divide out by that, that's going to be x minus 8. We're going to try this again with this one. Okay, we need to figure out how to split our middle. This is going to be 7x squared plus something plus 8. Or in your box, you're going to have your 7x squared and your 8 here. What you need to figure out is what goes in those two boxes so you can factor. And so we're going to look for two numbers, and we're going to continue to do this next class. They have to multiply to be 7 times 8, A times C, and they have to add to be my B term, which is 30. So they have to add to 56, or they have to multiply to be 56 and add to be 30. So So I do 56 and 30, and it is 28 and 2. And so 28 and 2. So this is going to be it's a positive 28x and a positive 2x, a positive 28x and a positive 2x. And I go through and find my greatest common factor. My greatest common factor here is x. My greatest common factor here is going to be 4. X times 1x is 7x squared. X times 2x, or sorry, 1x, 7x squared, and then x times, I don't know why I put an x there, sorry guys. Then x times 2 is 2x. There we go. Same thing here, greatest common factor for these two terms is 7x. So I take a 7x out. When I divide that out, that's just going to be a plain x. Divide this out, that's going to be a positive 4. The greatest common factor here is 2. So I factor that out. That's going to be x plus 4. If you do it right, you're going to have x plus 4 in both spots. And so my answer is x plus 4 times 7x plus 2, or with the box method, x plus 4 times 7.